Sermon of the week, Chili. Who's there? The man said, hearing what he thought was a knock on his door. There was no response, so he repeated his words. Who's there? Again, there was no response, but obsessive as he was, he put down his book, The History of Israel, and went to the door. He opened it slowly and saw a tall man standing there, whistling softly some tune that was unfamiliar. He looked up at the taller man and said, Didn't you hear me? Can I help you? Yes. May I come in? The tall man said. He was dressed in a dark suit, no tie, but it appeared to be a very finely tailored suit. The homeowner noted the shoulders of the visitor were quite prominent. Sure, come on in. What is it you want? Directions or something? No, I have a little task for you. Oh? Well, as you can see, I'm rather busy cooking supper. The aroma of the chili pervaded the entryway. The visitor could see the kitchen off to the left. Well, that's why I stopped by. That will help a lot. Well, I've got some guys coming over for supper and a game of poker after. I probably have enough food if you'd like to stay for supper. Are you a poker player? The homeowner, noting the nice suit, decided maybe he and his poker buddies could relieve this guy of some money. No, I can't stay for supper, and yes, I play poker. Do a lot of gambling, in fact. This comment sent alarms through the homeowner's mind. Maybe this guy is with the Jerusalem Syndicate or the secret police of King Jehoiakim. Maybe I better listen and then get him out of here. So again, how can I help you? I would like you to take the kettle of chili and come with me. What for? Hey, what is this? I'll have to ask you to leave. I don't have time for you or this. Go beg for food somewhere else. With that, he pushed the larger man back out the door and slammed it in his face. That'll teach you. I'm a respected man in the community. Get off my property and don't come back. The homeowner went into his kitchen to check on his precious chili. It was simmering nicely and smelled great. He knew his buddies would scarf it down. His secret to great chili was buying the best kosher beef in the city. His butcher, Javan, asked a high price, even high for a lawyer's salary, but it was worth it. He hosted these poker games about twice a month, that is if he was not working on a big case. He only had a couple of small ones at present. He took a small spoon and tasted his creation. It was hot, but very tasty. He had considered entering his chili in a contest, but he had not had time as yet. He suddenly heard a noise and dropped his spoon right into the chili pot. Now what? Then he realized maybe one of his buddies had come early to get a head start on his chili. He walked out to the door and opened it. Hello again. May I come in? The same man in a dark tailored suit said. Look, pal, I said I don't have time for you. Now get off my property or I'll call the police. His face was turning red as he spoke. I would like you to take the kettle of chili and come with me, the visitor said evenly. He used the exact same words he had used a few minutes earlier. Now look, I'm an attorney, and with one call on this horn, I can have you arrested and thrown in jail. I would like you to take the kettle of chili and come with me. The visitor had now used the exact same phrase 3 times. Look, I've had it. Now leave or I'll blow this. The homeowner picked up the ram's horn, but just as suddenly he dropped it on the stone floor. He began rubbing his left forearm and flexing his hand. He leaned down to pick up the ram's horn, but noticed his sword leaning against the near wall. He grabbed it by the handle and held it up in the visitor's face. Now will you slowly back out of my house, down the walk, down the driveway, and out into the street, and don't come back. With lightning quickness, the visitor grabbed the sword from him, let it fall to the floor, and stood staring at him. Now, go get your kettle of chili, come back here, and follow me. Fear now filled the homeowner's skin. He dutifully went and got his kettle with a piping hot chili and returned and stood in the entryway. I do this under protest, he said in a rather trembling voice. The visitor put his finger in the piping hot chili, then in his mouth. Needs more salt, but I think he'll like it, he said. Then he grabbed the homeowner's long hair, pulled hard on it, In an instant, the two, along with a kettle of chili, were airborne. One of my favorite movies is called Angels and Demons. It's probably not high on any of your lists, but it is an intertwined tale of intrigue set in Rome and the Vatican. What makes it stand out for me is the reality of the historical settings. The settings are valid places and lead to interesting study and insights. Not only history, but prophecy. The only reason I came upon the above story is through that movie. One of the scenes in the movie takes place in the Chigi Chapel in the Basilica of Santa Maria della Popolo in the north part of the city of Rome. In a niche of that chapel stands a marvelous sculpture created by Gian Lorenzo Bernini called Habakkuk and the Angel. It is pointed out and discussed by the characters in the movie. The movie does not portray it very well. I was privileged to visit Rome, visit this chapel, and see the sculpture firsthand. It truly is an amazing work of art. Bernini filled Rome with amazing sculptures of all descriptions, and this one, Habakkuk and the Angel, carved from 1656 to 1661, does not disappoint. Once I saw the movie Angels and Demons, it dawned on me that I did not know the story of this sculpture depicted, so I had to do some digging. Habakkuk is mentioned only 2 times in the Bible, the King James Version, that is. I finally found this story in the Septuagint. In that version of the Bible, the book of Daniel has 2 extra chapters. The last chapter, Daniel 14, describes the above story. The Septuagint, meaning 70, is the Greek translation of the Bible done around 250 BC. 70 books were translated as Greek became a far more widespread language than Hebrew. Ptolemy II, Pharaoh of Egypt, ordered the Hebrew Bible to be translated into Greek so it could be placed in the great library of Alexandria. He ordered 70 Hebrew scholars to translate the Bible independently. To that end, he placed them in 70 different rooms. The result was that all 70 translations into Greek were identical. This one legend, I believe, as only God could have orchestrated such a miraculous result, is true. In any event, the Septuagint and the Apocrypha, a part of the Septuagint, remain in the Catholic and many other Bibles to this day. However, when Jerome, Wycliffe, and Martin Luther came on the scene in the Reformation around 1500 AD, they leaned toward the Septuagint as not being divinely inspired. The religious community has wavered back and forth on this question since the Reformation. The King James Bible, authored in 1611, does not contain the Septuagint or the Apocrypha. However, as the chapter of Daniel 14 was written some 2,000 years ago, I choose to use it as a valid history. So who is this guy Habakkuk, and what is his short 3-chapter book all about? You will remember that our buddies Joel and Nahum's books also had only 3 chapters, but were powerhouse books with great messages. In this respect, our boy Habakkuk measures up very well. The meaning of his very unusual name is unclear. I know of only one word with 4 K's in it, knick-knack, and 3 K's, Habakkuk. Some think his name might mean to embrace. In any event, he is one of a kind. I know of no other person so named. He is the 8th of the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament and was a contemporary of Daniel, Jeremiah, and King Jehoiakim of the kingdom of Judah. He references the Chaldeans in his book, known by scholars to refer to the kingdom of Babylon, which laid siege to Jerusalem in 597 BC, after Nebuchadnezzar had defeated Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. King Jehoiakim began his reign of Judah in 610 BC and was the second to the last king of that country. He first aligned with Egypt, but after the Battle of Carchemish switched allegiance to the Babylonians and died during the siege. His son Jehoiachin lasted 3 months on his empty throne before Nebuchadnezzar installed another son, Zedekiah, on the throne as the last king of Judah. He lasted 10 years, For in 587 BC, the final siege of Jerusalem ended the kingdom of Judah. Habakkuk's book consists of 3 chapters outlining what will happen to Judah, why it will happen, and who will orchestrate the happening. The kingdom of Judah is still functional when he states in chapter 1, verse 2, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear, even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save? Exclamation points in these sentences. Habakkuk's impatient God answers him immediately, Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and the judgment doth never go forth, for the wicked doth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. Habakkuk 1, 3, and 4. Sound familiar? These 3 verses sound as if they were written today in 2020 AD. The exact events and actions are happening as we speak. Sin, grievance, spoiling, violence, law slacked, no judgment. Bad circle the good, wrong judgment. Sounds just like what our newspapers are reporting today, some 2,600 years later. The tragedy is that this story could have been written every year from 4004 BC to 2020 AD, and it would be accurate. By Habakkuk's time, the world had been spinning for over 3,500 years, some 35 centuries, and nothing humanity did had changed. The sin, spoiling, violence, war, lawlessness continued on and on ad infinitum. Habakkuk screamed out to God. Why? God screamed back, because. God tells Habakkuk he will raise up the Chaldeans. Habakkuk probably thought this would be a good thing, and probably was sympathetic to them when they invaded his country. But this bond soon melted away as Habakkuk lived through the first siege of 597 BC and the second 10-year siege later in 586 BC. Habakkuk says in chapter 2, verse 1, I will stand on my watch and set me upon the tower. He hopes this Nebuchadnezzar will save and preserve Judah. But in verse 2, God lets Habakkuk know that Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon are just another means to an end. The kingdom of Judah is hopelessly corrupt, but their conqueror Babylon will be no different and will endure the same fate as Judah and Israel before her. In fact, Babylon falls to the Medes and Persians in 535 BC, ruling the world for a brief 70 years. Habakkuk's book could be applied to Israel, Judah, Babylon, or any other kingdom in world history. But for this Judah, God tells Habakkuk to write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. However, in verse 4, God provides a ray of hope. But the just shall live by faith. Referencing back to the movie Angels and Demons, the comment is made by one of the actors that Habakkuk was the prophet who predicted the end of the world. Upon reading Habakkuk's book, that comment is very true. Habakkuk predicts the end of Judah, the end of Babylon, and the end of every kingdom going forward. He ends chapter 2 with a scathing condemnation of worshipping idols. What profiteth the graven image that the maker thereof hath graven it, the molten image and a teacher of lies, that the maker of his work trusteth therein to make dumb idols? Woe unto him that saith to the wood, Awake, to the dumb stone, Arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. Habakkuk 2, 18 and 19. But in verse 20, God reminds humanity of one precious fact. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Habakkuk finishes his book with a marvelous prayer in chapter 3. Take time to read it. It sums up 6,000 years of history beautifully. One interesting point is in verse 15. Thou didst walk through the sea with thine horses, through the heap of great waters. This is clearly a reference to the children of Israel marching through the Red Sea. Previously, I do not believe that march indicates God was marching with them, but Habakkuk clearly points this out. What an amazing Creator we have, one who sticks with us through thick, thin, and beyond. I'll now finish my story about Habakkuk and Daniel. I encourage you to read firsthand the account in Daniel 14:31 to 42. You can easily find it in the Bible Gateway, RSVCE, and many other sources. The tall man in the black suit, along with the attorney and his pot of chili, were soon zipping through the morning-evening sky. As they flew, the tall man in the dark suit no longer had his coat on. He had stretched forth both arms, which produced huge wings on which the two were now gliding over the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, and points east. Habakkuk had finally told the man his name, but the man said nothing. Habakkuk was amazed at the sights he could see from 30,000 feet in the sky. He was also very surprised that not one drop of chili had spilled from the pot he was holding. He was belted into a seat in a golden chariot the man was towing behind him. It was attached to the man's ankles with gold chains. Within an hour, Habakkuk felt his chariot slowing and losing altitude. Soon he could see the city of Babylon in all its glory. He had heard much about the hanging gardens, but words had not done it justice. Soon the man in the chariot lit in a promenade of that garden. The first thing Habakkuk heard as he exited the chariot was the roar of a lion. He shuddered, but the man indicated for him to take his pot of chili, which was surprisingly still hot, and head toward the roar. Habakkuk saw no one, but headed dutifully toward the roar, and soon was at a large gate. The guard asked him who he was and what his business was. Habakkuk held up the pot of chili. Go right in, the guard said. The chill went down his back, but he surmised the guard must know what he was doing, and he went through the gate. He entered a huge room and stopped short. At least a dozen huge lions were staring him in the face, but none made a move toward him. Two little cubs were playing on the floor near him. They both came over, smelled the chili, but then resumed playing. Maybe my chili doesn't taste so good, Habakkuk said aloud. The lions don't seem to like it. Hey, Habakkuk, great to see you. How was your flight? Habakkuk's jaw dropped a foot. Daniel, how are you? What are you doing here? Why are these lions? Come in, come in. Here, let me take the chili. You know, God said he was sending me supper, but he didn't tell me you'd be coming. It's so good to see you. How are things back in Jerusalem? Daniel set the chili on the table as Habakkuk looked around nervously at the lions. God did send me. In fact, he ordered me. Daniel set 2 bowls on the table, poured 2 glasses of wine, and dished up the still steaming hot chili. You know, Habakkuk, if the world knew how good we had it, our God takes care of us no matter what, no matter where we are, no matter what trouble we might be in, no matter what danger we might face, no matter what the situation, he is there. How'd you get here from Jerusalem? Some guy with a golden chariot flew me here. There you go. Only our God can do such a thing. I bet you're one of the first to fly from Jerusalem to Babylon. I bet no Hebrew, Egyptian, or Babylonian has ever done that. Maybe Enoch, Habakkuk said. Oh, I'm sure. How you getting back? Oh, the guy's waiting for me out in the garden. Those gardens are amazing. Aren't they, though? I think God had a hand in them. Man, I can't wait to see Eden. Daniel said. He ate ravenously and soon was on a still piping hot second bowl. How you doing here? Habakkuk asked. He too was now eating heartily as the lions watched. What'd you put in this? It is so good. Little of this, little of that. Trade secret. I am doing good. Have a few enemies, hence the new lodgings. Daniel swung his hand around the room. Two cubs came over and licked his hand. But it will be for the best. You know our God tries hard to teach the world the marvelous benefits of being good, of doing right. Habakkuk shook his head and his spoon fell to the floor. The lions didn't seem to notice. Yeah, God has told me that most will never learn, that the end is coming. You know, old Nebuchadnezzar had a dream a while back. There was a statue. And the gist of it was that Babylon will fall and be followed by at least 3 other great kingdoms. When will that be? Habakkuk asked. The dream didn't say, but it did say that one will come someday and rule an everlasting kingdom, Daniel said, rubbing his now very full tummy. That would be the Messiah, Habakkuk said. Messiah? Daniel said. Who is this Messiah? My buddy Isaiah has written extensively about him. Born of a virgin, will die to save the world. Well, I'd sure like to talk to him. Might fill in some blanks I have, Daniel said. Want a second bowl? Yelled out the ladle for Habakkuk. No, I'm stuffed. My chariot might not be able to get off the ground the way it is. The two laughed. The cubs came back over and one jumped in each of their laps, but they had no interest in the chili. They just wanted to play. I named them Shadrach and Meshach after my buddies. Yeah, we heard about that back in Jerusalem, Habakkuk said, peering at Daniel's hands, expecting to see burns. Daniel held them up, shrugging his shoulders. I wonder if maybe your Messiah was in there with him. There was a 4th man in that inferno. Maybe it was... I think so. As you say, our God takes care of us no matter what. If we ask him. That's why I'm trying to get this across to the Babylonians. Maybe this week with the lions will help. I'm sure it will. Well, I best be going. I'm sure my chauffeur is getting impatient. The two stood, dispensing the 2 cups onto the floor. They resumed their little battle. Thank you for coming and for the wonderful chili. It will last a couple of days. Hopefully I'll get out of here by then and back to my prime minister tasks. The 2 shook hands, but it wasn't enough. They embraced and then parted. Habakkuk headed for the gate. Have Isaiah send me a scroll, some more info about this Messiah, Daniel called. Habakkuk turned and said quite loudly, I will. God bless you. The lions just sat and watched.